Well, for those of you who don't, I'm going to be a hot mess. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Cathy Duus. I've been attending Christ Lutheran Church for about 27 years now. I've been married to Don for almost 42 years, and he's a lifelong Lutheran. We have 2 children, Elisa and James, who are baptized Lutheran in the Danish Lutheran Church. Yes, there is such a church. They eventually attended Sunday school, confirmation, and high school youth here at CLC. Until now, I have flown under the radar in regard to these faith stories. I even thought I might miss it altogether. That was until a nameless friend put my name out there. Thanks. Just so you know, this is not exactly my comfort zone, as you can probably tell. It's actually well beyond it. If you're all below the age of 11, elementary school age, that might be different, but more on that later. I tend to talk too fast when I'm nervous, so just know I'll do my best to keep it under control and do the best I can without becoming a hot mess. My story isn't unique, I suppose, as many go through similar ones, but it seemed awful and unique to me at the time. As Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13, "But remember that the tests that come into your life are no different from what others experience, and God is faithful. He will keep the tests from becoming so strong that you can't stand up against them. He will also provide the way out so that you may be able to endure it." I guess you could say I endured it. So I grew up in the Pasadena area. My parents divorced when I was 5, and they both eventually remarried several times, actually. I stayed with my mom, as that was done at the time. And although I was baptized at the age of 3.5 in an Episcopal church, I was not brought up or ever attended church as a child. I didn't have the easiest of childhoods. After my mother's second marriage ended, around when I was 10 or 11, my childhood home was foreclosed on. I still remember someone stapling the notice to the house. My 2 siblings, myself and my mom, had to move into an apartment in a not-so-nice part of town. My mother's second husband filed for custody of my half-sister who lived with us and won, so she moved away. That's when my mother started drinking, more and more heavily as time went on. By the time I was about to start junior high school, we had moved to a new apartment in South Pasadena because the neighborhoods and schools were so much better. My mom worked, but eventually I think lost her job due to the alcoholism. We became a welfare family. We no longer had birthday or Christmas celebrations. We didn't have a whole lot of anything, really, which is probably why I still spoil my kids and grandkids today. She continued to drink so much that my sister and I were left to fend for ourselves much of the time, making our own meals, doing laundry, all of that. Some might think, hey, that's great, but we were basically adults at the age of 10 or 12. Right around this time, my mom remarried for a 3rd time to a man who was also an alcoholic and abusive. By the time high school rolled around, my mother was pretty much passed out on the couch with a gallon of something next to her and cigarettes burning in the ashtray. It was easy for me to come and go as I pleased because no one ever monitored any of it. I got a job as soon as I could in order to buy the things I wanted, like makeup and trendy clothes, because we couldn't ever afford those things. Although I always went to school and got good grades, I started dating young, around the age of 14, as did my sister, who was even younger. But again, no parent supervision. I guess I was fortunate enough to meet a guy who also had an alcoholic in the family, so we coped together, I suppose, in our own way. Looking back, I did some crazy stuff I'm not proud of. I was in an adult-style relationship at a young age, partied, experimented with alcohol, and tried smoking of that stuff that, that's legal now, but wasn't then. Some might call me a wild child, I suppose, so it's a miracle I am where I am today. Anyway, during this time, my sister, who was younger than I, ended up with an unwanted pregnancy at the age of 13. I remember the cops coming, talk of statutory rape, and lots of fighting. No charges were filed, and my sister secretly terminated that pregnancy with the help of a friend's mother. My mother's husband started getting abusive, and then one time I talked back in her defense. And I was stopped by a huge glass of beer being thrown on me. He never actually hit me, but it came close, and I kept to myself after that. My younger sister then went to live with our father, but I wanted to stay where I was because I had a boyfriend. So, at the age of 16, on my 16th birthday, my mom said, "You can invite all your friends over for a party." She served alcohol. My friends thought that was cool. I kind of thought so too, but looking back, obviously not. But I didn't know any different. That Christmas, my grandmother bought me a framed poem, a copy of the poem Footprints. You know the one, where there's two sets of footprints in the sand, and God's walking beside you in the troubled times. Well, when it ends, there's only one set of footprints in the sand, and when asked, God replies, "The times when you have seen only one set of footprints, that's the time I carried you." This sort of changed things for me because I began to think about God and how I survived all this. You can fill in the word. I do know now that, like that poem, God had a hand in it, as he always does. After high school, at the age of 19, I met a new guy named Don. We began dating and hit it off. I was nervous because I was 19 and he was 26. Certainly too old, I thought. A girlfriend assured me it was fine. Well, soon I moved in with him to escape my own personal hell, and we got married when I was 21. And here we are. Although we still never went to church, things changed for the better. I finished some college and got a job as a dental assistant, and eventually we bought our first house, not far from Don's parents. It was such a blessing to be around a normal family. Our kids were born, and soon after we decided to move to Santa Clarita. I started working for the Saugus Union School District as an instructional assistant, campus supervisor, and PE teacher, which I think was a part of God's plan too, as everything is. Donna and I still didn't go to church at all, but then in about 1993, we were invited to a baptism from one of our neighbor's daughters here at CLC. And Pastor Joe, I didn't know you were going to be here tonight. Pastor Joe did the baptism in his standard fashion. He carried the baby around the sanctuary and talked about how this was a new birthday and a reason to party, and how this baby was a part of the church family. I loved it. I think I decided then and there that we needed to come to church, this church, and that my kids needed it as well. A Lutheran church, perfect for my husband. We've been here ever since, and CLC is my only church home. As my faith started to grow here, it gave me strength that led me to getting my bachelor's degree and California teaching credential at the Master's University. I had several amazing professors that helped build my faith, and some that were just plain questionable as far as I was concerned. One even argued with me about infant baptism and then me wanting to miss class because it was Good Friday and I wanted to go to church. Thankfully, because of my faith in being here, I held my own during these arguments. Have I had blips and challenges along the way? For sure. Those blips were replaced by me seeing the good that God did in my life, like when my mom, who is an admitted agnostic, was dying of cancer at a young age, a direct result of her abuses. She was in the hospital and asked to see one of my pastors. Well, Pastor Joe agreed to come meet with her. And she listened, all the while saying he couldn't be right. They talked about God and about her being agnostic and maybe even atheist. And as he left one day, he told me, well, you never know what's in the heart. He came over several more times to see her and would pray with us, and me, I suppose. I hope, for my mom's sake, that she thought maybe Joe was right before she passed away. Another blip was after I got my credential. And although I had subbed in the classroom a great deal and worked in schools forever, I wasn't hired as a full-time permanent teacher because it was when teaching had crashed in California and every teacher was being laid off. I was really angry with God and wondering why things didn't go my way. Psalm 37:8 says, "Stop your anger, turn from your rage, do not envy others, it only leads to harm." Again, God was in charge, and he showed me because I was hired as a school office manager for Saugus and allowed to use my gifts in other ways. When I retired early in 2019, right before COVID, unsure that this was the right thing to do. God showed me again because right after and during COVID, I was put in charge of my granddaughter's distance learning 4 days a week. My daughter is a teacher, and she had her own class to teach. Distance learning was a challenge at best with a 5 and a 7-year-old, let me tell you. God was working, though. I taught Aubrey, the youngest of the two, how to read and put all of my educator experience to use for those girls and their success. They're both doing so well, and I couldn't be more proud of them. It was God's purpose within me, I'm sure. God has given me a wonderful husband, a strong daughter who is a teacher, and a son who is currently a deputy sheriff in Santa Clarita. I also have been blessed with a beautiful daughter-in-law who is a nurse here in town, and a son-in-law who is an electrical engineer with Meta. I have 2 beautiful granddaughters, Ava and Aubrey, and a great community to live in. God is good. Is my faith still growing? Yes, and I hope it never stops, because it shouldn't. I expect more blips, but I know he's with me, along with only one set of footprints in the sand.